Welcome, everyone. We've got people joining us live right now. We'll be starting in just a minute. Good afternoon. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started because this will be recorded and we have a lot to share, and hopefully we'll get to some Q&A. So I just want to say welcome, good afternoon. Thank you all for your time. We are going to be tackling how to win with operators and build demand beyond distributors, going inside the 2026 Food Service Marketing Report. So I am Kate Finley, the founder of Belle Communication and Brilli. Bell Communication is a food service focused strategy and PR firm. We help brands understand what's challenging in their market and build the visibility strategies to capitalize on it. We lead with market intelligence and strategic insight, and we've worked with more than 100 companies from restaurant franchisees, ingredient suppliers, to CPG innovators. I mentioned I'm also the founder of Brilli. Brilli was used for this report and to create the report. It is a market intelligence tool that connects food service brands directly with chefs, operators, and consumer communities through social media influencers. Through it, brands can test concepts, validate trends, and gather real-time insights to prepare them for now and next. I want to introduce now Reed McCord, the founder of FirstBite, previously at Impossible Foods. Welcome, and can you tell us a little bit about FirstBite and your background?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Reed McCord, founder and CEO of FirstBite. We're a software platform that helps suppliers reach operators directly, helps them build demand and measure which of their investments are actually working. And how it works is we gather data on every potential customer in food service, and we build workflow tools that help our customers actually access the decision makers at those operators. To track them in our sort of data entry free CRM, because every potential customer is already in there, and incentivize those folks to purchase with rewards programs. And yeah, pre FirstBite was at Impossible Foods for 10 years, built the food service business, ran strategy, and Impossible built a kind of several $100 million food service business in a couple of years. So a lot of FirstBite for me has been building the tools we wish we had, and making the playbooks that really worked for us at Impossible available to everybody in the channel.
That's awesome. Of course, we all recognize Impossible Foods. Thanks, Reed. And Mike Kostyo, VP of Menu Matters, previously at Data Essential. I would love to hear, Mike, from you, a little bit of your background and about Menu Matters.
Sure, absolutely. So, like you said, I've been in the industry for about a dozen years now. And previous to being at Menu Matters, I was at Data Central working in trend insight. So, I worked on the trend spotting team there, kind of overseeing early stage trend research. So, what's going to come down the pike in 5, 10, 15 years. I made the move to Menu Matters 2 years ago this month, actually. So, we are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. And basically, we are a data backed consultancy. So, we really believe in data, but we also believe in layering in that human element. So we do a lot of psychological research around what consumers are thinking and feeling and what they want from the food industry. So it's purely consultative. We never know the types of projects that will come down the way. And then part of that human-centered research is also operator research. So, it sounds funny to say, but operators are humans as well. And so, keeping track of what they're thinking and their emotional state also plays a part in what they purchase. So a lot of that went into the report that you're going to talk about, kind of our perspective on the buyer and purchasing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Thank you, Mike and Reed. So, Mike and Reed both partnered with us in developing the 2026 Evolving Food Service Marketing Report. We collaborated with a panel of chefs and industry experts to highlight what's changing in food service sales and marketing. And I'm excited to dive into those findings today. And I'm so glad we have the two of you as our panelists. Okay, so before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. If you did not read the report and maybe you didn't even download the report, do not worry. We will send it to you after this time together today. So while we will be digging into the report, some of the things we share today will not be included in it, which is why it's great that you're attending today. I also invite you to use the chat function to submit your questions. No matter how seemingly big or small, please submit them. And if we don't get to them today, we will follow up with you with answers afterward. All right, that's the housekeeping. So before we jump in, I want to start with a poll. In the last 2 years, how have your marketing and sales cycles evolved? So we've got some options here. So whether it is buying cycles are more complex, it's harder to reach operators, decision making now involves more people across marketing, nothing has changed, or something else. I feel like we should have all of the above as an option too, because I feel like all of these are true. And we heard that time and again in our report. So please select your options here. It just gives us more information to know what we're working with in the conversation today. Okay. And the poll, there we go. All right, so what I'd like to do is start with the big question at the heart of this discussion. And then let me see if I can, I don't know if it'll show the poll results right now or not. Oh, look, they're coming in. There you can see how you compare to your peers as well. Look at that. Okay. Decision making now involves more people across marketing, culinary, and procurement. It's harder to reach operators. That's the top one. It's harder to reach operators, which is why we're here today, right? So I love you're in the right spot. Okay, we'll let those continue to roll in. So the big question I want to start with is how have operator or supplier relationships, that connection between the two, how has it evolved over the past few years? What's changing in food service right now? And I would love to have you both address this. And Reed, why don't you start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so much is changing. I like one kind of big thing that's maybe obvious is just in the last 5 years, any operator who survived COVID did so partially by moving digitally. So they're participating in delivery, review platforms. They have to have a web presence. They had to survive. And that also means that from the manufacturer supplier perspective, they can be found, targeted, connected with initially without hopping on a plane. So I think, one thing we see is a lot of high growth brands are finding sort of alternatives outside of the sort of like intermediary sales motion. So alternatives to the distributor or broker led motions, and because they're expensive, they're hard to measure, and they're replacing them with investments where they can own relationships directly. A lot of sort of first connection points, first handshakes are digital, especially when people are sort of investing in growth. And when we think about our 50 manufacturers, and we're actually their CRM, so we see a lot of data on this. Their top sources of leads are often coming from direct outreach, really highly targeted email campaigns, and then also just they're creating digital content that's out there on the web that's driving inbounds and sort of educating decision makers outside of that sort of like that intermediary or in-person setting.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that as well. That's something when I founded Belle more than a decade ago, we were all remote and that was kind of weird. And now it's everybody, we're doing the meetings virtually all the time. Mike, what would you add to that?
I mean, I absolutely agree. I think the big thing that we've seen is that digitization has really fragmented the way that people
Mm.
learn about products and, the things that they're going to purchase and put on the menu or put in their store. I think, I saw a stat a couple weeks ago, which was that the average person on any given day consumes something like 74 gigabytes of data. And
Oh
it
my
was the
goodness.
equivalent of what a highly educated person 500 years ago would have consumed in their entire lifetime. So
Oh my goodness.
when you think about all of that info, I mean, that's how we learn about things. That's how we learn
Hmm.
about products. That's how we learn about what we're going to put on the menu. And so we have information coming at us from every direction, from email, from social media. And that is the story, I think, of fragmentation. So there is no central arbiter, I think, anymore of, whether that's a distributor or even a media property saying, okay, this is what you need to have on your menu, and everybody does. I mean, the place that people find out about your product or what they want to purchase can come from anywhere at this point.
Absolutely. And I will say we saw that in our report too. Discovery is more self-led today than ever before. And operators are engaging with more content in more places, to your point, before they make a purchase. And our research showed that operators are now consulting with 8 to 9 sources before making a purchase, which it used to be 5 to 6. So that's really been increasing over the past few years. Social media is playing an increasingly bigger role within B2B, obviously. We'll talk more about that. But I'm always thinking about AI right now. And we can't think about, we can't forget that we have social SEO and social search, but then we have AI search. And people are finding, to your point, that so one, the digital space, and then two, the point around consuming so much information, that knowledge consumption. At this point, we don't have to have an unanswered question, right? So people are definitely changing up how they relate and consume and find each other. I want to ask if there's anything in the report that surprised either of you. And if you want, Reed, we could start with you. Anything that was surprising or what was most surprising?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll just make a comment about the report, which is that it is filled with chef buyer feedback, which is it's so common to sort of see these reports that are just like feedback from intermediaries, from service providers like us, from other manufacturers, and like be a step removed from what the buyer is experiencing. And so I love that there's more people on the panel that are actually buyers and chefs and that kind of thing than the rest of us. So I think that voice is really captured in the report. I think the biggest surprise was I did the interview a couple months ago and I sort of forgot a little bit, and then I opened it and I was like on the page one. I was like, that's me. So
You were surprised to find yourself in the report.
the first image on the first page.
Oh, that's awesome. Mike, how about you?
There's a lot of surprising findings in the report, I think. I think going into it, we kind of thought, oh, we kind of have a handle on what operators are thinking. And then you see some of the stuff. The one that you just talked about, which is that they're consulting a lot more sources. It makes
Yeah.
sense, what we just talked about. There are a lot of sources. But at the same time, when we talk about COVID and post-COVID, that operators are so pressed for time. You think, I would have thought maybe that they are consulting a few less sources just because their time is so constrained. And one of those sources being Reddit being very popular with
Yes.
operators, I thought was super interesting. I think that was the theme that came up a lot, is trusting fellow chefs or people that you trust in the industry. I mean, maybe part of that is the fact that there's so much information out there. Who's my trusted network that can kind of cut through all that noise and give me a trusted answer? I know that they're a chef working in the field. So I thought that Reddit was such a key source for chefs was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to how we talk about that B to B to C. We can't forget that we're all people at the end of the day. And so just as we as consumers are behaving now, and that's shifted, we're absolutely seeing that in the buying process. I will say that I was personally surprised by how clear everyone was that relying on distributors is not the key to growth at this point. When operators look for information, they're looking for information, ideas, and new products. They're relying less and less on distributors and sales reps and more on their own research. Just like we've got, I think, a slide pulled up here. Oh, a couple quotes here on this exactly. We heard this repeatedly in the report from distributors themselves, that suppliers need to focus on building intrigue and preference with operators. So I love both of these quotes. These are two of our panelists being quoted here. And Reed, I was curious your opinion on this as well from a distributor point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you look at like a broadline distributor, they're going to have 200,000 products, and they're not in the business of helping anyone grow.
Yeah.
And so I'm pro distributor because they do a really hard job, but ultimately their business requires they sort of wait for you to have traction, and they want to order from you when you've sort of de-risked the sell-in for them. So I really don't think of it as like chicken or the egg, and the report definitely captures this. I think the other piece is these big distributors are increasingly launching their own private label brands. And so you're competing with something that your customer is selling their own alternative to in many cases. But just, when I think about the 400 or 500 manufacturers in the last few years I've connected with, I don't think I've heard anyone say, Cisco is the primary driver of my growth. And it makes sense when you put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that too, how important it is to focus on building that brand and creating partnerships that help increase awareness and that new mix. And to that end, so without relying on distributors, let's talk about what channels we should be using and what strategies we should be working on to help build up that demand, and which ones maybe have been over indexed on in the past. So this slide shows us the new mix that we're looking at. So it's not just trade shows, it's not one tactic, it's not even over indexed on one tactic at this point. You have to have each of those cylinders pumping: trade show, social, chef partnerships, which we're going to talk more about, earned media, content, search, email, and sampling. It's a lot to think of. And I think for some, it can feel, depending on where you are in the stage of development, it can feel more or less daunting. But I think if you can create a strategy for each, we'll talk about where to focus and, of course, bringing partners on to support you. So these are the tactics that have emerged when we surveyed for the report as the most impactful when influencing operator choice. So again, I would like to do a poll question here. Which of these tactics are you currently using? And so you can choose all that apply, and I can't wait to see the results on this as well. So take a minute and you can select all that apply. Great. All right, I will wait and we'll look and see those results as those come in. Thank you for voting. There we go. Let's see our data. Trade shows, of course, that's the big winner there. But then we've got email, yep, social, sampling. Those are our top ones. We've got more coming in. We've got content, but it looks like earned media is not as, yeah, we have less with earned media and left with chef partnerships. So we'll talk more about those and search as well. So it looks like there's room to grow within that marketing mix. And I want to talk more about each of these, and we'll talk about those tactics specifically. But before we do, I know we're all familiar with the hot take, and I would like to get a hot take from each of you. In your opinion, and it's a hot take, so it's, this is being recorded, I guess, but we won't hold you to your opinion. What's one thing most suppliers, in your opinion, get wrong when trying to connect with operators? And I'll start with Mike this time.
Okay.
Mix it
Um,
up.
I don't know if it's a hot take to say. I just think when marketers are so kind of self-focused as opposed to operator focused, and it is so disingenuous and really comes across as disingenuous. I think,
Mm,
it's so easy for us to get tied up in our own concerns and why we need to sell something. And we were in that room and we decided to make that change, and now the product is blue, and so we got to sell more of this blue product. And at the end of the day, your marketing looks like that. And instead of, explaining to operators, hey, if you purchase this, your sales lift will be X%. And
mm,
actually reaching out to that particular operator and saying, not only do we know that, but we know that for you, a fast casual operator in this region of the country, your particular sales lift will be this. And this is why we reached out
mm,
to you. That type of thing, it really stands out these days. I mean, we've all heard how operators are pulled in so many different directions and they're having a really tough time and traffic is down. And so anything that feels, personal and also genuine, I think cuts through. So
mhm.
just, at the end of the day, stop that. I hate to say, I know marketing obviously is kind of the key to this entire conversation, but cut that
Mhm.
marketing speak. And I think I know, we all know what I'm
Yes.
talking about when I say that.
Yes.
And just
Mhm.
talk like a real person talking to another real person.
100%. 100%. I agree with that. Reed, what about you? What's your hot take?
Mike took my hot take, but maybe I'll double down on it. A little more. Yeah, I mean, it's a great visual. It's basically, operator empathy is so important, and I think a lot of folks lose track of really putting themselves in the shoes of the operator. And I think once you
Mhm.
do that, it changes the way you sell, and the way you communicate, and the proof that you need to sort of win deals. And so I'd say people also underestimate how well operators know their business. When you run a business that's at sort of a knife's edge, couple percent margin, at
Mhm.
the end of the week, you're going to get to know it really, really well, and you're going to have a sense for what levers work and what levers don't work. And so, being able to really credibly say that you're going to solve a problem that hits their bottom line is ultimately what I think the best brands do. And so, Mike mentioned some of these, right? Like, I credibly am going to drive more traffic because I have a huge audience for my branded products, or I know that customers, based on other operators I work with, it's the number 3 item ordered in this operator, or it's a super novel experience that's going to drive new people in the door. I think, anything that can allow them to charge more, one brand I love, Mike's Hot Honey, is killing it as a branded upcharge, right? Where they literally get branding at the front of a pizza place. They get to charge more for what they're selling. And, I think that's a great sort of proof point to say, the economics of on this are sort of a no-brainer. Then there's like back of house stuff, just like working with our product is going to reduce prime costs in some way. It's less expensive than the alternative, or it saves time, or it reduces waste. And if you can make a credible case on any of those things, it's going to give you a huge leg up. I just talked for like 90 seconds and mentioned 9 things. That's not the right way to approach operators. So like the other piece of empathy is how much attention you actually have. Like they're busy, in the world of cold email, for example, make 1 point, make 2 points, make it the right point. But you're only going to get a little bit of attention. Most engagement is on a phone still with an operator. And so that's the other side of empathy is really like respecting their time.
Yeah, that makes me think of, how important it is to conduct, the social listening and really connecting one-to-one with operators to understand how they're engaging with media, how they're consuming, what they're looking for, what the behavior is, which of course we have a lot of that data in the report. But I also think it's great, and I would say essential, to bring on partners who have that first party data and they're able to, speak to the trends and help lift. So yes, and I think in that, when we're thinking about lifting and how to do that, Reed, I know your team at FirstBite is huge on email, which of course can be a big lift. So can you tell me more about how food service suppliers can make email outreach work? Keep talking. You're doing a great job.
Sure. So I mean, the traditional sales process for most manufacturers, if you look back 10 years, is to sort of focus and compete on the same top 300 operators nationwide, which is called that like 100 units and up. And those operators matter, but 75-80% of the market is actually outside of this group. There's 650,000 other decision makers that are not in that sort of top cohort. They're often higher. You're making fewer price concessions. They make decisions way faster, and there's a lot of them. And so, when we think about sort of the FirstBite playbook, we have every single operator in our platform. You can create these like very small cohorts and send them really deliverable sales, like one-to-one sales emails. So every 3 to 20 unit restaurant in the Atlanta area with pizza on the menu and a high Instagram followership, get the sort of decision makers at those folks and send them like really high quality personalized content automatically. And we see an 8 to 9% engagement rate across all of our customers when they use this playbook across millions of emails. And there's just not really another channel that gives you that like direct pick a cohort of operators and get engagement like that. But the sort of the double-edged sword is it's like cold emails, like building a rocket, right? Like only one mess up in the rocket and the whole thing's going to blow up and collapse. And that's sometimes been why people have abandoned the strategy is you don't have the right tech stack, or you don't have the right contact information, or you don't have the right sort of tight message to a cohort that it makes sense for, and it doesn't work. But when it works, it's the lowest cost per qualified lead motion out there. And it works really well with it can be really well reinforced by having a great brand and having great sort of content outside of email. But it's definitely, just, I think I said this before, since we're a CRM and we get to track, we get to see what is driving sort of close won deals across our customers. It's definitely really one of the top. I was actually surprised to see it in the poll as 80, I think it was 80%. So maybe this is just like the webinar crowd is also killing it on email, but we run into a lot of manufacturers that are not doing any cold email.
Well, but to that point, what are some best practices where you see them work really exceptionally well with email? Because just because we're doing email doesn't mean we're doing it right,
Yeah, it's a little different. The best folks are creating a rhythm where they're creating a goal. They're saying, I want to find and connect with the sort of the next 5,000 operators. And I want to split up my actions into, reach out to 300 to 500 operators at once, and try different things. And every single month or every single 3-week period, test a new message to a new type of operator, make sure it's super personalized to those operators. Find everybody with Nutella on the menu and tell them about your product and reference that. And rather than create sort of like randomized AI copy, think if you're going to automate connecting with 400, 500 operators, you should spend 10 times longer thinking about what you say to that specific audience. And so I think that's a big piece. And then really getting the tech stack right. It's super important to not sort of end up in spam and not getting delivered. That's sort of the non-negotiable.
Yes, those are great. And the report has more as well. So you guys can check that out. And yes, no one wants to end up in spam land. That's a really sad place to be. So Mike, so we're talking through, just to recap for everybody, we're starting to talk through the tactics within this marketing mix. So we talked about email. Now we're talking about events. So Mike, you guys do a lot of events at Menu Matters. I want to hear about how events and trade shows are evolving, because we saw from those poll results that everybody's doing trade shows, right? So how are things different now? What do we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think that finding was so interesting in the poll and in the report itself, how important
Mhm.
trade shows still are for so many people, figuring out which products that they want to purchase. I think for us, as attendees, we attend tons of trade shows all year long. And the thing that we've really been seeing is a shift from kind of consumption-based trade shows where you're just kind of walking down the aisle and trying a new product, and then hopefully something is interesting to you, and a lot more kind of experiential trade shows. We're gonna put you one-on-one with a lot of the manufacturers that are here in kind of a speed dating style format. We're going to, take you out into the city in small groups, and you get to experience the restaurants. We're gonna do, short form tastings where you're in a room and you're tasting everything around a particular theme. So I think, again, just trying to make the information really relevant and making sure that the time that somebody is spending and money that somebody is spending to travel to that trade show is worth it for that. And there's a million trade shows, so you have to compete with it. We're going to the fancy food show in January here, and they've changed the winter one to be, it's called the Fancy Fair now. And so it's so much more hands-on, so much more experiential. You go out into the city. I think that's a great example of just how trade shows are trying to evolve and really meet the needs of what operators want and their general purchasing audience. I think as a company that puts on a lot of events, for us they're smaller events, and we've seen a real demand for that, kind of because what we just talked about, which is talking through with that operator at the end of the day the nuanced kind of needs that they might have. That's really only possible in kind of a small format style event. So we will do events like, a couple months ago, we had 3 commodity boards, and they wanted to put on an event in Denver where they brought national accounts from across the country together. And we went out into Denver, we saw great restaurants, we learned in the room together. But really the whole thing was about, let's learn from each other. What are you dealing with as an operator? And then as a commodity board, is there a way that we can come up with a solution for you? And again, making sure it's not salesy. It's not about trapping somebody in the room so they have to hear about how great a commodity is. It truly is all of us being in the food industry together. How can we help each other and figure out how to be successful? So I think those types of events have really become popular. Now, the hard thing is, we're all pulled in a million directions, and it's hard to get people out of the office, and it's hard to prove to your boss that, yeah, I want to go to Florida in winter on the company dime. And so I think if you are putting on events, or if you are interested in kind of this space, making sure that you showcase to that person what the ROI is going to be, both the soft and hard. If you can showcase, people that attend this event usually see X% sales lift in the menu items that they put on the menu or whatever, it may be great. But also, everybody wants to make sure that they're on trend. So you're going to see the latest trends at this event, or whatever it may be. You're going to learn about a commodity that's already on your menu, things that you never knew that you can impart to the consumer at the end of the day. And so both for that person, but also so they can make that case for their higher ups, like, yeah, you need to send me because of all these things. We see a ton of events where here's a 3-page PDF that you can actually send to your boss, and that's your excuse for coming. So you really have to showcase to the operator, if you're going to be out of the office for 3 days, it's going to be worth it for you.
Can I add a little something
Absolutely.
to
Yeah, do it.
yeah. So I know I'm on my email stump, but in-person experiences are so important to build a relationship with someone that's making a decision. One place we see people sort of fall short on, and there's even a question about sort of measuring trade shows, is the work before and after the trade show is so important. So like a regional show, reaching out in this, maybe it's email, it's like trying to set up meetings ahead of that show. So there's people that you've got time booked. And then the post-show follow-up it's so common for that to fall off. So having like that you do all this work, you spend, 90% of the investment is to get to the show. And then the most important thing is how you engage with these folks afterwards, whether it's, sending personalized email to folks after the show or just making sure you nail your follow-up quickly. Allows you to then measure like, okay, I created this many leads and I engaged with them, and a year from now, how many of them are in my pipeline closed won? Should I do it again?
And I feel like a lot of times the operator or chef or whoever it may is looking for you to follow up. They expect it after the fact, for that, they know that you're the person trying to make the sale. And so if it's worthwhile for you, I've seen 100 different operators at this show. I expect them to reach out to me if, we had a worthwhile conversation. I don't think you're annoying them by doing that.
But they won't remember you more than a week later. Like there's kind of a clock.
Seriously.
Yeah, within that window. Yeah, I really appreciate both those perspectives too. And I think when we look at event marketing overall, right, we were heavy into events, then COVID happened and everybody had to pull back. And then we've seen over the years now events they've been coming back, but they've been coming back in this more intimate sort of setting, like you were talking about, like how can we really engage or how can we make it feel more intimate and connected, even if you're at an NRA show. So making it very experiential. We are not here to be sold to at this point. Like the operator is more and more educated and choosy. And so how can we create those hyper personalized experiences? And I think that's where, and also how do we of course drive people to those shows. But even if you're going to, okay, this is going to always be a part of my budget to go to the NRA show, how are you really standing out there and creating these experiential elements? And I think that really, as a segue, lends itself to chef partnerships and sampling, both tactics that operators in our report told us are key to their decision-making process. So even as marketing goes digital, food must still be tasted and tested. And our panelists in the report shared that fellow restaurant owners and chefs have a major influence on operator buying decisions. So chefs tend to only recommend products they actually use and like, which makes their endorsement very powerful. And I wanted to share a stat from the report that the stat was the most shocking to me, actually. And it's that the role of chefs has been noticed recently, and Google searches for chef partnerships have risen almost 1,400% from 2024 to 2025. And as of, let's see, yesterday, we pulled this stat again, and the number is now almost 2,500%. So that's 1,000% increase just since we pulled this stat a couple months ago. So this is an insane increase, and we need to pay attention to this because it's only rising. So I could talk a lot about this, but I actually want you to hear from chefs and that we used and pulled in our report, so you can hear firsthand from them what they think about when it comes to making buying decisions and working with operators. And of course, chefs are also operators a lot of times. So let's go ahead and share that video.
I think from food service businesses in particular, engaging with chefs that know and use their products to encourage other chefs, you have this authenticity and believability that they're seeing people are using it, or this is how they're using it in a restaurant. Most of the content that I create, there's been some other stuff, but a lot of it's in my kitchens and making something or showing them how to do it. And I think that adds a ton of value because food service is noisy, but everybody's scrolling on social media.
I would say if other chefs are on board, it definitely helps in supporting that product or the brand, because then it's kind of vetted in a way. You already know that a chef that you respect uses it, then you kind of automatically think that that is quality product, as long as you have a similar cooking style or similar values as that chef, then I would say, yeah, I mean, if I recommended a product to a chef, I would 100% stand by it. So I would expect those chefs to do the same.
If ever I've turned somebody down, it's usually for a pretty consistent reason, which is that it's not something I use and it's not something I could see myself using, especially when you talk about like other operators following that content, being a member of the World Pizza Champions, just trying to participate in this industry as somebody who hopes to get natural and honest feedback from others that he looks up to in this industry. I want to make sure that I'm putting out content that is authentic and in line with my values in this industry and in this art form. And so I can best do that by just aligning myself solely with the companies that I would use, even if I didn't have some sort of brand deal or arrangement with them.
I didn't really think that, I mean, I know people are watching it, but that like their idea that chefs trust chefs or restaurant operators trust restaurant operators, and suddenly by putting out this content that there were people that wanted to ask me about it, and then even beyond just like, oh, that was cool, DMing me, or when I see me, hey, I really want to bring more of this in, or hey, I import this cheese, can you suggest a domestic cheese that would be a good comparison? And so that's been really cool because I get to talk about something I love, and it's an exchange of ideas.
I wish there was more brand collaborations. Recently, I did a collaboration for Juneteenth, and so I went in and I showed them how I would use their products in my restaurant. So I remixed, they have a great pancake batter. So I did like a sweet potato pancake paired with my fried chicken and things like that. I would love for other brands to allow us to show them other ways than the standard ways. Like you go to food shows and they're like, this is this and this is that, but really having a chef, their take on it.
I love that. One of the things I love the most about the report, all of the data that we got firsthand. And I wanted to hear Reed and Mike, and whoever wants to jump in first, it's fine. What do you think about that chef feedback? Has that been true based on your experience? Would you add anything?
Yeah, first of all, isn't it great when the video plays live?
I know, I always get nervous. But it worked.
Yeah, I mean, this takes me back to my Impossible Foods days, where like every time we launched in a new city, it was let's find some amazing chefs to partner with to tell the story. So it was David Chang in New York and Tracy Desjardins in San Francisco, and those beautiful partnerships only happen when you're building direct relationships with folks. Like your distributor's not going to set these up. Your broker's not going to set these up. They're probably not going to come to you. And so I think definitely like winning chefs will, that drives trends for other chefs, but it also, I think, is a layer of endorsement for the consumer. So like when we're talking to, when we're talking about FirstBite to a manufacturer and they have a retail brand, and they're sort of thinking about the investment, we often make the pitch, don't buy a consumer facing billboard, close a restaurant. Don't buy an ad on Hulu for your meat sticks, get them in the grab and go section of a cafe that people love, because when there's sort of 30 things to choose from instead of 30,000 things to choose from, and there's endorsement and curation, it's just really, really good for the brand. So yeah, cool to see.
Yeah, I would just say, I think part of it is that, it is worth it to find that one or two chefs that really can speak to your brand. Sometimes is it worth it to travel to this event? And, maybe I'm not seeing the ROI necessarily. But if you find those couple of chefs who can really be brand ambassadors, that compounds, tenfold, 20-fold, whatever it may be. I'm in a WhatsApp group for ambassadors, which is a group of us who have traveled to Australia to learn about the lamb industry in Australia. And it's 99% chefs. And then a couple of us are researchers. And, the conversations that are happening in there are, hey, I'm going to put a short rib on the menu tonight and it's not working. And so would anybody suggest a product that might help or something that I can swap in? And that type of conversation is happening constantly. And so if your product or brand can be a part of that conversation, all the better. And, those chefs are going to their sous chefs and teaching telling them about those products. And I mean, it's just compounding from there. King's Hawaiian has an Ohana Council. I just saw them announce on LinkedIn. So you see brands doing a really good job. And I think the other side of it is you learn so much from those chefs and operators on your side. What are the issues that you're in a really genuine way that's not, sending out a random survey? What are the issues you're dealing with? You hear from them, like in these groups, like, I'm having a real problem getting X product. Is there anything out there that can be a replacement for it? Everybody else in that group, I'm seeing it too. I'm seeing it on the West Coast. I mean, you see real time reactions from chefs. So I think it's just so worth it to be in those conversations and look out for those opportunities where you can be in a genuine way.
When you have they tell it like it is too, usually, like when you
Yeah,
have
oh gosh, right? Absolutely.
which
You
is
gotta
really
have a tough
helpful. You
skin
can
if
have a
you're
lot of
working
people
with-
not telling you the core problem with your
Yeah.
product. And you get a couple of chefs that you have a relationship with, you're going to find out.
Absolutely.
That's true. That's true. And that's what we want, that authenticity. And this is really, I mean, the conversation around social that we're having too, right? As we continue to talk about these tactics and within influencers, we are seeing, this is where we see the power of chef endorsements really play out through influencer partnerships. Suppliers can have their products showcased in real kitchens and get in front of target audiences. We, on a consumer side, from a consumer point of view, right, we were looking at influencers, but now this is the evolution where we're seeing, okay, a B2B influencers using a chef not just to, be consumer facing, but thinking about how that informs the buyer journey and connecting with operators. So this is great. I actually have a slide we can pull up here, a quick case study. There we go. So one chef told us in our report about how his content partnership increased demand with both consumers and operators. That's something that's increasingly important. So when we think about how we pull these chef partnerships together and we think about social and the impact of influencers, how can we speak to the B2C and B2B side of things at the same time? What sort of questions would they have? And I think there's a lot that goes into this when you're selecting a partner, because you want to make sure that it's really very much aligned with the story you want to tell. It's very collaborative. And like you said, I mean, it's got to be an exchange at this point. People are not wanting dictated to. A chef's going to tell you what their true opinion is, and it can be a very collaborative process. So I love hearing this. I'll say about social as well, that similar to what you said earlier, Mike, that operators are using social platforms like Instagram and Reddit to glean menu inspiration, consumer insights, and track food trends. I mentioned Brilli earlier. So that platform, what that does is it actually connects to influencers to get all that data. So we're seeing more and more data being gleaned from social. And we're also seeing the use of social media to answer business questions like sourcing new products, peer feedback, what business challenges, and I'm going to talk about AI in a minute, but we're seeing that increasingly be used for social. So we need to think about what questions are we answering. And when we're looking at our own channels as brands, there's also an opportunity for suppliers to enhance their own social media presence. We, as Mike and Reed mentioned before, suppliers tend to over focus on themselves. And it's really how it used to be, right? It's just not like that anymore. We have to think about, what does the operator need? And this is very apparent on social. Within the report and our analysis, it showed that higher engagement is seen on supplier content when it includes people, not just product. You have to remember that operators go to social for education, inspiration, and entertainment. Again, similar to how we act as people, right? So not just to put product specs out there. And really, I like to say we should be courting operators and not informing them. So at this point, they know what you do. I'm trying to understand more of who you are and how we can work together. So Reed, I'd love to hear more from you on how the buyer looks at social and not just consumers today.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big theme we have a lot of our customers are we track every operator's social following, how many followers they have, that kind of thing, and their Instagram, things like that. And we have a lot of folks reaching out either via social, or I already talked about email, and credibility is a big piece. So when you reach out to an operator, and you've gotten past the 10 seconds of attention and they're a little interested, I would expect them to look at your socials and see content that's not just consumer facing, but maybe operator facing. But maybe more importantly, this sort of like, are we in the same dating pool here question? Like, if I'm a chef and I've got 300,000 followers and a brand is reaching out talking about how they're going to drive traffic and they have 300 followers, wants to do a brand partnership, probably not that interested. But if the crossover of they really think of their customers as their audience, if their crossover of audiences is sort of large and incremental, it's credible to say, you know, maybe I do this brand partnership and spend less money paying DoorDash to bring traffic to my restaurant. So it helps a lot. It's just another reason to build your sort of social presence.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something about also, doesn't your data say that Instagram is one of the top 3 ways that suppliers connect with operators?
Yes. Yeah. So
I thought that was striking.
When it comes to outbound, it's a huge channel for us.
Yeah, that's, again, look, it's just funny because you wouldn't think it was. You would think, well, people are just doing that for leisure, right? To think about Instagram, it really shifts how you're focusing and what you're doing within your marketing. So Mike, how about the use of social listening in all of this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one, social listening, kind of just passively understanding what people are talking about on social media becomes so important in your category, in your own product, what people are talking about when you're thinking through, what those needs are. So we worked with lentils. So the lentils board out of Canada was looking at, chefs and what they were talking about. And we actually went to Reddit and we did some social listening in the chef subreddits. And we found that there were chefs in those subreddits that were saying, I love lentils for the homemade plant forward burgers that I'm putting on the menu because they're so cost effective and, I can use them in catering and they hold really well. And for all these reasons. And so it kind of, spoke to us on, okay, this is a very operator-led initiative that we should, support and jump into and figure out how do we create those solutions. So making sure that you take the time to listen to those conversations. It's so easy to not do that. I put on my calendar 30 minutes at the beginning of the day just to kind of consume what's on social media and what's that. And it's always the first thing that falls off. You got meetings and I have things to do, but it's so, so important to do it. I have a friend, he's a chef at a major pizza chain, and he posts constantly on LinkedIn that he's looking for a sausage product that performs in X way and that, I need this amount by this time. And unless you're, on LinkedIn and listening to him, you would never know that that opportunity is there. But I think, we've talked about this entire time, and Reed, you were just saying, is it's got to be so relevant to them at the end of the day. You see them saying things like that. And you see those, thirsty salespeople in the comments that are like, well, I have a chocolate cake and, it's just not relevant at all to what that. So listen, but then also, take the actual information and truly listen and make sure that you're giving them a solution that, actually makes sense for them at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you actually got a question right now. If is there anywhere else you recommend that brands listen for topical conversations like that? You mentioned LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. So we actually use a social listening platform called Brand Watch. So, and I don't get a kickback from it. It's just the one that we like. And so, if you have access to a platform like that, it kind of takes all of the social media platforms and aggregates them together and finds themes, which is really, really nice and saves you a lot of that time from having to log in. So I think that's a great opportunity. And there's some out there that are much smaller and you can just pay $20 a month and do that social listening pretty easily.
Thank you. That's great. I know when you were talking about LinkedIn, that's a good segue to earned media, which I saw the numbers. It was pretty low there. Are we capitalizing on search and earned media? So let's talk a little bit about that. So one, I would say trade media. So we do so much earned media. It's the majority of the work we do within earned media and trade media. That remains near the top of the list for channels that operators turn to when sourcing information. This is a huge opportunity. So not only So when you think about it, by getting featured in a trade publication as a subject matter expert, so you pitch an idea or someone's pitching an idea for you, and you can either be interviewed or you write that content, you share the insights on topics like emerging menu trends, sustainability practices, how is legislation impacting the industry, or what's innovating in the category. You can position your brand as a partner who brings value beyond products. We see time and again, this is a major lead generator. So not only when we think about earned, oh, the big national plays, no, actually what is much more powerful and you can drive a very clear ROI is through working with those trade media, and operators are sourcing and reviewing and they're gleaning information and applying it to their decisions. So it is essential. If you are not focused within that, definitely, I mean, feel free to shoot me an email afterward and I can talk to you more about it. But it's absolutely something that we also use at Belle for ourselves. So it's, something that I don't know if you guys have done much in that space, but it's really it's surprising. And I think similar with the influencer partnerships, a very strong ROI there. I want to say that I've been such a geek about AI recently, and it's a moving target, right? Every day, just when you think you know what you're doing, it's changing. But something that's changing within earned media connected to AI, earned media, so PR, is favored in AI results because it's seen as the most credible and is often the most timely. So what's happening is these the answers in AI are sourcing trade publications, national publications, because they already have that clout and the reputation. And we're seeing that 51% of consumers now use AI powered search tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini. Now, this is the crazy stat. So 51% of them use those tools instead of traditional search engines like Google. That has major implications in consumer behavior and how people are how consumption is happening, how decisions are being made. So if you're not focusing within AI search and figuring out how to have AI pull your information into the answers that are being asked, you are missing out. And if you don't start doing it soon, you're really gonna miss out. So I'm passionate about this topic because it's changing so quickly. And in our report, we highlighted how AI search is being used for real world sourcing and business needs. So some examples: food service protein ideas that cut labor time, updating menus for Gen Z coffee trends. So business decisions are being made with these platforms. And so I want to ask another poll. It's our last one, but if you can answer, have you checked to see how your brand appears within AI generated answers? It feels scary at first because, you might not be showing up the way you want, but knowledge is power, you have the data, and then you can start creating a strategy to rank better for those. So would love to see your answers to that. And while people are answering, Mike, your team does a lot with using trend reports and talking with news media. So can you talk to us a bit about the value that provides?
Sure, absolutely. It's exactly what you just said, that, in that world of 74 gigabytes of information coming at us every day,
Yeah.
curation is so valuable. And that's what a lot of those B2B publications provide. So, if you're going through 8 to 9 sources to figure out what to purchase and put on the menu, that trusted, article or that trusted magazine that you read every month that really speaks to your niche in the industry, that's going to help you make that decision at the end of the day. So I think B2B and earned media is absolutely an incredible resource. I mean, we saw it in the report over and over, and it's actually fairly easy to forge those relationships. They're often looking for content. They're all going to start putting out their editorial calendars for 2026.
Yep.
So you're going to see the themes that are really relevant and that might speak to the product that you have. I used to write freelance. I was a journalism undergrad, and so I
Mm,
relied on the press releases that I got and the information that I got all the time, and forging those relationships with, journalists and freelance reporters and the editorial directors at these publications is so valuable. So many of them have events as well. So, you can
Mhm.
sponsor that event and you actually get your product in front of chefs in a really cool way on the menu that night or whatever it may be. So there's so many avenues. And like you said, the ROI at the end of the day is so worth it, particularly in our industry, which I think the food
Mhm.
industry is unique. You have to have a lot of
Yeah.
creativity and knowledge that is very particular. And so I think that's also why you see such a reliance on, publications that understand all of that.
Absolutely. And we have seen that, carry over into other, industries and topics like waste management, different things that influence food, So we have found that to be true as well. I actually think we have time for a couple questions. So we did a great job speaking quickly. Okay, so if you have a question, please put it in the chat. It doesn't matter if it's for a specific person. We did receive one if we can go back to the topic of trade shows. So the question was around how manufacturers and operators measure their trade show experience. Is it being measured well or just attended for the networking and the experience that you have? What do you guys think?
It's so dependent from, I think, manufacturer to manufacturer, what your size. Some companies have great CRM systems that they use, and all of that information is in there. And at the end of the year, when they're deciding whether to go back, they can say, we had 27 conversations, 3 of those led to an actual product sale. So I think you do see some companies that are pretty good at that and are monetizing or figuring out what the monetary ROI is. For the most part, I think it's a little bit more, I feel like I got the value out of it. It's a little, less kind of,
Mm, less
I
data,
have the
more
hard
feelings.
numbers that, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then for some,
Uh-huh.
there's probably a little bit of in between. I think, the exhibitors probably, have far more of a focus because their spend is so much more. Whereas the operators, I think it's more the time, I'm just kind of figuring out at the end of the year, I can attend 3 events, and these were the 3 that I kind of felt were the most interesting or I had the best
Mhm.
conversations with. And so I think it also depends on which side of the industry you're in.
Yeah, I would say that's true as well. And I think, it depends on the show. I would say, because dollars are tighter than ever, we should be looking at that measurement. And what are we sourcing, meeting secured, whatever those things, whether it's education or whatever you're going after, really being clear about that. And then doing a postmortem, how was it? What
Yeah.
did we get? Looking at that and evaluating and comparing to next year because, we can't go to all of the trade shows, not typically, right? So we have to make those decisions and we have to also pay attention to, is that ROI consistent? Because maybe it worked for the past 5 years, but you know what, year 6, it wasn't that great. So maybe I want to explore something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with that, as we have more questions, you can feel free to follow up with us afterward, but I do have a couple more things before we wrap. So there is a lot more content in the full report, including insights from our panelists and prescriptive steps. So we really were careful to not only share the data, but how can we make these changes? We'll share that report with you. I want to thank you both for being here, and I have one last question. What do you have that's coming up in 2026 that the people in this room should know about? And I'll start with Reed.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'd say like our big launch for 2025 is sort of like a new motion, which is our digital operator rewards platform. So there's
Mm,
nothing like it. I think the biggest challenge for manufacturers in food service is the lack of attribution with the investments they make. So folks, a normal brand will spend a couple $1 million on digital broker sampling shows, and they get very little visibility into what's converting. So you can use our platform now to create promotions that can be embedded in
mm,
any motion, and they measure which operators sign up, how many sign up, who buys, and ultimately tracks who orders all in real time. So that's something
wow.
we're really excited about and happy to
Yeah,
chat with anyone about that.
that's awesome. Congratulations. That looks really great. And Mike, what would you say? What do you have going on?
I'm probably most excited about our 2026 Consumer Need State Report. The survey is actually going into the field today, so it'll be really fresh
Oh.
data. And it's a giant survey, Gen Pop, just asking consumers how they're feeling, what do they want, what's their emotional state as we head into 2026. So you can see last year's report. It's all free. It's at Menu Matters 2025 trends.com, but that should be coming out in December here. And the other thing I would say is follow me on LinkedIn, kind of shameless plug. But every Friday I do a Friday 5 where I just post 5 interesting things that I learned this week. And so the next one will come out tomorrow morning. So it's this type of stuff, data that we're seeing and interesting industry stuff. So.
Yeah, and I love that we pulled this slide up because to your point, this is how you connect with us afterward. And yeah, Mike, that's a great point because we are each sharing on LinkedIn. Please, of course, connect with us. I included my email directly in case anyone wants to reach out. Happy to answer questions, but that sort of thought leadership, that helps, that sort of insight from thought leaders on LinkedIn, it helps me make business decisions. It helps me understand what's coming next. And it's absolutely so valuable. So I want to say, as we're at time here, both Mike and Reed, thank you both for your time today. This has been a really good discussion. And I love seeing the insights and the information from the report come to life and learning more about the challenges and thank you to everyone who's attended. We will follow up with you afterward. And I just want to wish everyone a great end to 2025. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.